The Grand Asterion Hotel glittered beneath thousands of crystal lights. Every table was draped in white silk, every glass filled with vintage champagne. More than 200 of the wealthiest families in the Republic of Norhaven had gathered to witness what the media called the wedding of the decade. The bride, Celeste Ashford, smiled for every camera. Diamonds sparkled around her neck, and the custom gown flowing behind her had taken nearly a year to create. Tonight wasn't just a wedding. It was a celebration of two powerful empires becoming one. The Ashford family would merge with the Blackwood Consortium before midnight. Business leaders, politicians, celebrities, and foreign investors filled the ballroom, each eager to witness the announcement that would reshape the nation's financial future. I wasn't there to stop the wedding. I wasn't there to beg for forgiveness. I came because someone had personally invited me. The invitation rested quietly inside my jacket, sealed with black wax and marked by a silver crest no one else in the ballroom possessed. Beside me stood Gabriel Kane. His tailored black suit couldn't hide the posture of a career soldier. His gray hair was neatly trimmed, and his expression never changed. He scanned every exit, every security guard, and every unfamiliar face without appearing to move at all. "You still have time to leave," Gabriel said quietly. His voice carried no pressure, only concern. "If that's what you want." I looked across the ballroom. "I've spent 9 years walking away. This time I'm staying." At the center of the room, Vivian Ashford laughed gracefully while greeting another group of distinguished guests. She looked exactly the way the magazines described her. Elegant, confident, untouchable. Then her eyes found mine. Her smile disappeared. The champagne glass in her hand froze halfway to her lips. For a brief second, genuine fear crossed her face. She recovered almost instantly. No one would have noticed the change except someone who had spent 23 years calling her mother. I noticed. Without saying a word to anyone, Vivian walked toward the stage. The musicians gradually lowered their instruments. Conversations faded. She accepted the microphone from the master of ceremonies with a practiced smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began warmly, "I sincerely apologize for interrupting this beautiful evening." A few polite laughs answered her. "I believe we have an unexpected guest." Every eye followed the direction of her hand, straight toward me. "I'm afraid this young woman doesn't belong here." Her tone remained pleasant, almost sympathetic. "As painful as this is, she was once part of my family." A wave of whispers spread across the ballroom. People turned in their seats. Some recognized my face from old photographs. Others simply reached for their phones, sensing that something unforgettable was about to happen. Vivian lowered her eyes dramatically. "I've prayed for her. I've tried to help her. But some people refuse every opportunity they are given. I never imagined she would choose my daughter's wedding to seek attention." The room grew quieter. Every sentence was carefully designed, every pause perfectly rehearsed. Celeste stepped beside her mother. She looked at me with open amusement. "So you actually came. I almost admire the confidence." She glanced at the security team. "I thought the guest list was checked 3 times. One of the guards answered nervously. "It was Miss Ashford." Celeste smiled. "Apparently not well enough." The surrounding guests chuckled. A few nodded in agreement. Others avoided looking at me entirely. Vivian sighed into the microphone. "I don't want this evening ruined, so I'll ask politely." She looked directly into my eyes. "Please leave." I didn't move. Neither did Gabriel. The silence between us stretched longer than anyone expected. Vivian's smile slowly began to crack. "Security." Her voice became sharper. "Escort them outside." 4 security officers immediately started walking toward us. Gabriel calmly adjusted one cuff of his jacket. Then he looked at the approaching guards. "I wouldn't do that." The lead officer frowned. "Sir, we're only following instructions." Gabrielle nodded once. I know. I followed orders before. But tonight you're about to follow the wrong one. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Something about the older man's calm confidence made them hesitate. None of them could explain why. Across the ballroom, the groom finally turned around. Adrian Blackwood had been speaking with several board members. Now his attention rested entirely on me. His expression changed instantly. The color drained from his face. Without another word, he started walking toward us. Adrian didn't slow down. He ignored the executives calling his name. He ignored the photographers rushing after him. His eyes never left me. The ballroom watched in complete silence. Celeste smiled nervously. Adrian? She reached for his arm. We should finish the ceremony. He didn't even glance at her. He kept walking, one measured step after another. Vivian forced another smile. I'm terribly sorry. My daughter has caused enough embarrassment already. She waved at the guards again. Please remove her. The lead guard took one more step. Gabriel shifted slightly. You've got 3 seconds to rethink that decision. His voice stayed calm. The warning felt colder than a shout. Before anyone moved again, Adrian stopped a few feet in front of Gabriel. The entire ballroom held its breath. For several long seconds, neither man spoke. They simply looked at each other. It wasn't hostility. It was recognition. Then Adrian smiled. A genuine smile. The first one anyone had seen all evening. It's been too long, Commander. Gabriel extended his hand. Good to see you're still alive. The two men shook hands firmly. It wasn't a business greeting. It looked more like two veterans meeting after surviving the impossible. Confused whispers swept across the room. Do they know each other? Who is that man? What's happening? Celeste laughed awkwardly. Oh, you've met before? I had no idea. She looked relieved. For exactly 3 seconds, Adrian released Gabriel's hand. Then he turned toward me. His expression became serious, almost respectful. He stood perfectly straight. His heels clicked together. Every guest watched in confusion. Then he raised his right hand and saluted me. The ballroom froze. No one breathed. Even the musicians forgot to lower their bows. The silence lasted so long that someone dropped a champagne glass. The crystal shattered across the marble floor. Nobody looked down. Vivian blinked repeatedly. What are you doing? Adrian never looked at her. His eyes remained on mine. Ma'am, it's an honor to see you again. I returned the salute. Only then did he lower his hand. The movement was precise. Military. Natural. Celeste stared at him. Adrian, why are you saluting her? He answered without hesitation. Because respect is earned. And she earned mine years ago. Vivian laughed nervously. There must be some misunderstanding. This woman has never served on any corporate board. Adrian finally turned toward her. I wasn't talking about a boardroom. I was talking about the night she saved my life. The room erupted with whispers. Someone gasped. Another guest whispered, saved his life. Vivian shook her head. No, that's impossible. She has never even enough. Adrian's voice echoed through the ballroom. For the first time that evening, Vivian fell silent. Margaret Blackwood slowly walked out from the private lounge. Despite her age, every step carried quiet authority. No one dared interrupt her. She stopped beside Adrian, then looked directly at me. For a brief moment her eyes softened. It's good to see you again, Aria. I wish the circumstances were better. I nodded politely. So do I. Margaret faced the guests. I suppose introductions are overdue. She turned toward Vivian. You've spent 9 years pretending your daughter was a failure. Her voice became colder. You couldn't have been more wrong. Vivian's confidence finally cracked. What are you talking about? Margaret answered without raising her voice. The woman you tried to throw out, she paused, is the founder and chief executive officer of Ironcrest Strategic Group. Silence. Absolute silence. Several executives slowly stood from their seats. They knew that name. Every one of them. One investor whispered, "Impossible, Ironcrest doesn't reveal its founder." Another executive looked at me in disbelief. They're the company that protects half the country's critical infrastructure. They've never lost a client. They've never failed a security operation. Vivian stared at me. Her lips trembled. No, that can't be true. I reached inside my jacket. Very slowly. Every camera in the ballroom followed the movement. I removed a black leather credential. In the center, a silver phoenix gleamed beneath the lights. The Ironcrest seal. The room went completely still. Margaret looked toward her legal counsel. Then she gave a single nod. Everything was about to change. 9 years earlier, I wasn't wearing a tailored suit. I was 18, standing in the marble foyer of the Ashford estate with a duffel bag at my feet. Everything I owned fit inside it. Vivian stood at the top of the staircase. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. To her, disappointment always hurt more. So it's true. She folded her arms. You're throwing your future away. I'm choosing my own future. I kept my voice steady. I'm joining the National Defense Command. The silence that followed felt endless. Then Vivian laughed. Not because she found it funny, because she thought it was absurd. Our family builds industries. We don't carry rifles. I looked at her. Someone has to protect what people like you build. She shook her head. No, someone else does that. Our family leads. We don't follow orders. I had heard the speech before. Different words. Same message. Power mattered. People didn't. You've already enrolled in the academy? She asked. Yes. And you didn't ask my permission? I don't need it. Her expression hardened. For the first time in my life, I saw something colder than anger. Pride. Wounded pride. You would rather sleep in barracks than sit in the office your grandfather built. I'd rather earn my place. Vivian walked downstairs slowly. Each heel struck the marble floor like a judge's gavel. When your father died, I promised this family would never become weak again. She stopped only inches away. And now my own daughter wants to become a soldier. She almost whispered the last word, as if it were an insult. I want to become someone. You already are someone. She smiled bitterly. An Ashford. I don't want my last name to be my greatest achievement. Her eyes narrowed. So that's what this is. Rebellion. No, it's freedom. The front door opened. Gabriel Kane stood outside beside an old black sedan. He didn't interrupt. He simply waited. Vivian noticed him. So he encouraged this. No, I answered immediately. This choice was mine. She looked back at me. If you walk out that door, don't ever expect to walk back in. I swallowed. I understand. No. She shook her head. You don't. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a silver key, placed it in my hand. The key to your room. You won't need it anymore. I looked down, then slowly placed it on the entrance table. I'll always be your daughter. Vivian's face remained expressionless. No, you stopped being my daughter the moment you chose strangers over your family. Her words hit harder than I expected. But I refused to let her see it. I picked up my duffel bag, walked toward the door, never looking back. Outside, rain had begun to fall. Gabriel opened the passenger door. You okay? I forced a smile. I will be. As the car pulled away, I looked through the rear window. Vivian was still standing inside the mansion, watching, motionless. The next morning, every photograph of me disappeared from the Ashford estate. Within a week, my bedroom became a guest room. Within a month, my trust fund had been dissolved. Every account in my name had been closed. 6 months later, when my grandmother, Evelyn Hart, passed away, I wasn't told. I learned about her funeral from an old newspaper left in the mess hall. The service had ended 3 days earlier. I folded the paper carefully, walked outside, and cried where no one could see me. That night, Gabriel found me sitting alone beside the training field. He quietly handed me a small wooden box. It arrived this morning. No return address. Inside lay an old brass compass. Its surface was scratched with age. There was only one sentence tucked beneath it, written in my grandmother's handwriting. When you lose your way, trust the one thing they can never steal. I had no idea that compass would change everything. 6 years after leaving home, I had earned the rank of operations commander. Not because of my last name, because every mission I accepted came back completed. Even the impossible ones. The National Defense Command never published our names. We didn't wear medals in public. We didn't give interviews. Our victories belonged to the people who made it home, not to us. Crimson Valley sat beyond the northern mountains. Official maps marked it as unstable territory. Those who had survived it called it something else. The graveyard. 3 days before the mission, my commanding officer slid a black folder across the table. No mistakes. No publicity. No second chances. I opened the folder. Inside were 2 photographs. An elderly woman. A younger man. No names. Only code names. Our intelligence team intercepted a planned ambush. The convoy will be attacked before sunrise. You'll have 12 operators. That's all. 12 against how many? He looked away. We estimate 60. I closed the folder. When do we leave? He smiled faintly. I knew you wouldn't ask if the odds were fair. We deployed that same night. No lights. No radio chatter. Only the sound of engines cutting through the darkness. Crimson Valley earned its name honestly. Red cliffs surrounded the narrow road like towering walls. There was only one way in, and one way out. Gabriel drove the lead vehicle. I studied the terrain through thermal binoculars. Something felt wrong. Too quiet. I raised my fist. The convoy stopped instantly. What is it? One operator whispered. I looked toward the ridge. There. For less than a second, a reflection flashed between the rocks. Sunlight against a rifle scope. Ambush. The word had barely left my mouth when the valley exploded. The first blast threw dirt 30 feet into the air. The road behind us disappeared beneath smoke and fire. Move, I shouted. Defensive positions. Gunfire echoed across the cliffs. Bullets rained from both sides. The attackers had planned every angle. One transport vehicle caught fire. The driver never made it out. Gabriel pulled 2 wounded operators behind a rock barrier. They're boxed in. No, I answered. So are they. I grabbed the radio. Team 3, collapse the eastern ridge. Commander, that'll trap everyone. Exactly. Seconds later, a controlled explosion shattered the cliff face. Tons of rock thundered into the valley. Half the attackers disappeared beneath it. The remaining enemy fighters lost their advantage. For the first time, they were the ones trying to escape. Advance. We pushed forward through smoke and debris. Every step mattered. Every second cost lives. Gabriel kicked open the armored convoy's rear door. Inside, 2 civilians were trapped. An older woman, a younger man, both covered in dust. The younger man looked directly at me. You came. I frowned. You know who I am? He gave a tired smile. I know who was sent. Another explosion shook the canyon. The burning vehicle rolled toward the convoy. There isn't enough time, someone shouted. There is. I climbed into the vehicle. Help me get them out. Gabriel carried the older woman over his shoulder. I pulled the younger man free just as flames reached the fuel tank. Run! The explosion lit the valley like daylight. The shockwave threw all four of us across the ground. For several seconds I couldn't hear anything, only ringing. When my vision cleared, everyone was alive. Barely. The younger man slowly stood, covered in ash, breathing hard. He looked at me. I owe you my life. I shook my head. You owe it to the people who didn't make it home. He never forgot those words. Neither did I. The official report listed the operation as classified. No names, no photographs, no public recognition. Months later I learned the identities hidden behind those code names. The older woman Margaret Blackwood, the younger man Adrian Blackwood, the future chairman of the Blackwood Consortium. 9 years after my own mother erased me, those two strangers never forgot my name. I resigned from the National Defense Command 2 years later. Not because I was tired of serving, because I realized the next battlefield wasn't overseas. It was everywhere. Companies were losing billions to sabotage. Hospitals were crippled by cyber attacks. Aid convoys disappeared without warning. Governments reacted. I wanted to prevent. Most people expected me to join a private military contractor. The offers were generous. Some promised more money than I could spend in a lifetime. I declined every one. Gabriel waited until I finished reading the last offer. So what's the plan? I looked through the cafe window. This, he smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. We rented an abandoned warehouse on the edge of Ravenport. The roof leaked whenever it rained. The heating system had been broken for years. There were only 3 desks, 4 folding chairs, 1 old coffee maker, and exactly 2 employees. Gabriel and me. And row I. The letters looked almost ridiculous inside such an empty room. Gabriel folded his arms. Sounds expensive. It will be. How much money do we have? I checked our account. Enough for 26 days. He laughed. Then we'd better succeed by day 25. The first month was brutal. Nobody trusted a company no one had heard of. Every meeting ended with polite smiles. One executes, then he closed the folder. I don't hire startups. I hire experience. I stood. So do I. He frowned. What does that mean? It means your competitors already called. I walked out before he could answer. Gabriel caught up with me outside. That wasn't exactly diplomatic. I wasn't trying to be. A week later, that executive called back. His company had suffered a major security breach. We were available. I answered. But our price just doubled. He hired us anyway. We solved the breach in 48 hours. Not by luck, by preparation. The client told another client. Then another. Then another. Within 6 months the warehouse was too small. Within a year Ironcrest employed 73 people, most who some had been overlooked by larger firms. Every one of them had something to prove. I don't only where they wanted to go, or protect people before profits. Some investors called it naive. Others called it bad business. I ignored both. Gabriel Navhisi, if you don't like it, there's the door. People stayed. Not because we paid the most. Because they believed in the mission. 3 years later I power grids research facilities and humanitarian convoys across Norhaven. Our reputation spread quietly. We never advertised. We never chased headlines. Results traveled faster than marketing. One autumn morning our receptionist knocked on my office door. Ms. Ashford, you have an unexpected visitor. Who is it? She handed me a black envelope. No return address. Only a silver crest pressed into the wax. The Blackwood crest. Your attendance is not a favor. It is a necessity. Folded beneath the note was an invitation to the wedding of Adrian Blackwood and Celeste Ashford. For a long moment I simply stared at my own family name. The name that had erased me, now printed beside the man whose life I had once saved. Gabriel looked over my shoulder. This won't end quietly. I folded the invitation. No, it won't. Things the prayer it wa. I kept the brass compass in the top drawer of my desk. Not because it was valuable, because it was the last gift my grandmother ever gave me. Whenever a mission became impossible, I carried it with me. The compass had never pointed north. Not once. The needle drifted in slow circles, as if searching for something the world couldn't see. Every engineer who examined it reached the same conclusion. It doesn't work. They were wrong. It wasn't broken. It was waiting. The morning after receiving Margaret Blackwood's invitation, I unlocked the drawer. The compass lay exactly where I had left it. For reasons I couldn't explain, I picked it up. Something felt different. The brass felt warm against my palm. A faint click echoed inside the case. I frowned. The compass had never made a sound before. Gabriel L. What is it? I don't know, but something changed. Onto tiny scratches covered the back. They formed a pattern. The light struck the metal at just the right angle. L. Invisible ink. Gabriel leaned closer. I've never seen that before. Neither had I. Someone had hidden a message where only time could reveal it. The words were barely readable. Trust no Ashford. My heartbeat slowed. Beneath the sentence another line emerged. The truth sleeps beneath Stonebridge Manor. Stonebridge Manor. My grandmother's abandoned estate. No one had lived there since her funeral. I thought the property was sold. Gabriel, you know, so did I. I see ownership had never changed. The estate still belonged to Evelyn Hart. Legally, impossible. She had been dead for 9 years. On purpose. Gabriel closed the laptop. We're going. Today. By sunset our vehicle stopped before rusted iron gates. Stonebridge Manor stood beyond them. Silent. Forgotten. Almost swallowed by the forest. Nature had reclaimed the gardens. Broken statues leaned beneath climbing vines. Most windows were covered in dust. None were broken. Someone's maintaining this place. Gabriel whispered. I noticed it too. The pathways were clean. Mill someone had visited recently. It opened with a slow creak. The air inside smelled of cedar and old books. Everything remained exactly as I remembered. The fireplace. The portrait of my grandparents. Even the grandfather clock still ticked. It feels I stopped. As if she never left. Gabriel finished. I walked into the library. Thousands of books lined the shelves. Nothing seemed unusual. Until I noticed one volume sitting backward. I pulled it. A quiet mechanical click echoed behind the wall. Only a few inches. A hidden staircase appeared. Descending into darkness. Cold air drifted upward. Carrying the scent of old stone. Gabriel drew a flashlight. I shook my head. No. My grandmother built this. If there's danger, it's step by step. We descended beneath the manor. At the bottom stood a steel door. In it looked almost new. There was no handle. Only a circular slot. Exactly the size of the brass compass. My grandmother hadn't left me a keepsake. She had left me, and when the brass compass slid perfectly into the circular slot, a soft metallic click echoed through the underground chamber, followed by the slow hiss of hidden locks releasing after decades of silence. The steel door swung inward, revealing a room untouched by time. Rows of metal cabinets lined the walls, each carefully labeled in Evelyn Hart's elegant handwriting. There were no jewels, no stacks of cash, and no signs of hidden wealth. Instead, the room held thousands of documents, ledgers, photographs, and sealed evidence boxes. Gabriel swept his flashlight across the room before lowering it with a quiet smile. Your grandmother wasn't hiding a fortune, he said. She was protecting the truth. His words settled heavily in the silence as I stepped farther inside. A large wooden desk stood in the center of the chamber. Resting on it was a thick envelope addressed in familiar handwriting. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. Across the front, in faded blue ink, were only 6 words. For Aria, when you're finally ready. Inside the envelope rested a handwritten letter and a brass key. The paper had yellowed with age, but my grandmother's writing remained steady. It felt as though she had written the letter only yesterday, knowing I would one day find it. If you're reading this, it means the people I feared most have finally shown their true faces. Don't hate them, Aria. Hatred blinds good people. I need you to see clearly, because what lies beneath this room can destroy an empire. Beneath the letter was a leather-bound ledger. The first page listed dozens of financial transfers between Ashford Global Holdings and companies I had never heard of. Every payment carried Vivian's signature, even those dated years before I had left home. Gabriel leaned over my shoulder, studying the entries in silence. These aren't investments, he finally said. They're laundering routes. His voice remained calm, but I could hear the anger beneath it. I opened another file and found copies of contracts, offshore accounts, and shell corporations stretching back almost 20 years. Every trail pointed to the same handful of executives who still controlled Ashford Global from the shadows. They didn't build the company, I whispered. They hollowed it out. The realization struck harder than I expected. Everything my mother had accused me of wasting had already been stolen long before I walked away. What only Ironcrest may open this file. I like it. If 5 Gabriel, I slipped the drive into my pocket and closed the case. The wedding invitation suddenly carried a very different meaning. Margaret hadn't invited me as a guest. She had invited me as the final witness. Above. The next evening, the Grand Asterion Hotel glowed beneath thousands of golden lights, just as it had the night before. To every guest arriving in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, the celebration looked flawless. No one suspected that a single encrypted drive, resting inside my jacket, could reduce 2 corporate empires to rubble before dessert was served. Gabriel parked the car beneath the hotel's private entrance and glanced at me before switching off the engine. Once we walk through those doors, he said quietly, there won't be a way back. I looked at the invitation in my hand, then, inside the ballroom, a string quartet played beneath crystal chandeliers while waiters moved effortlessly through the crowd with silver trays of champagne. Every conversation revolved around one subject, the historic merger between Ashford Global Holdings and the Blackwood Consortium. Vivian Ashford stood near the stage, greeting investors with effortless charm. She laughed at every joke, accepted every compliment, and looked exactly like the untouchable business icon the public adored. Only I knew how carefully that image had been manufactured. Without hesita, and for the first time in years, uncertainty flickered across her face. It lasted less than a second before she recovered. Truth? She asked with a cold smile. You confuse resentment with truth. Before I could answer, the master of ceremonies announced the arrival of the groom. Every conversation stopped as Adrian Blackwood entered the ballroom. Cameras flashed from every direction while guests applauded the man who was about to unite 2 of Norhaven's most powerful families. Adrian accepted the applause politely, but his attention drifted across the room until our eyes met. He didn't smile. He simply gave the smallest nod, as if confirming that everything was unfolding exactly as planned. Margaret Blackwood entered moments later, escorted by her legal advisors instead of family members. That single detail caught my attention immediately. Weddings usually welcomed photographers and florists. Margaret had arrived with attorneys. Gabriel notices. The orchestra fell silent as the ceremony prepared to begin. Vivian stepped onto the stage beside Damien and Celeste, believing she was only minutes away from securing the merger that would cement her family's legacy for generations. She had no idea that inside my jacket rested the evidence her own mother-in-law had spent years protecting. And before the night was over, every lie she had ever told would be placed under the brightest lights in the ballroom. The ceremony began exactly on schedule. Soft music filled the ballroom as Adrian Blackwood took his place beneath an arch of white orchids. Guests smiled, cameras flashed, and the room sparkled with celebration. To everyone watching, it looked like the beginning of a perfect future. The officiant welcomed the guests before inviting Adrian and Celeste to step forward. Vivian sat proudly in the front row, her chin held high as she imagined tomorrow's headlines. A historic union. A new financial era. The Ashford legacy continues. I remained near the back of the ballroom beside Gabrielle. We hadn't moved since arriving. We didn't need to. The moment Margaret had invited us, our role in the evening had already been decided. Just as the officiant prepared to begin the vows, Adrian slowly turned away from the altar. Instead of facing Celeste, he looked across the ballroom until his eyes found mine. Confused whispers spread through the guests as he stepped away from the stage. Celeste reached for his hand. "Adrian," she whispered with a nervous smile, "everyone's waiting." He gently slipped his hand free without answering. His expression had become unreadable, and his pace never slowed as he crossed the marble floor. Vivian stood abruptly. "Adrian?" she called, forcing a laugh. "The ceremony is this way." Several guests chuckled awkwardly, assuming the groom was making a romantic gesture. They had no idea he wasn't walking toward his bride. He stopped directly in front of Gabrielle first. The two men exchanged a silent look that carried years of shared history. Then Adrian extended his hand. Gabrielle accepted it without hesitation. "It's good to see you again," Adrian said. "I was beginning to think you'd retired for good." Gabrielle smiled faintly. "Retirement never lasts for people like us." The guests stared in confusion. No one understood why the groom was greeting an unknown man while his bride stood alone at the altar. Reporters lowered their cameras, unsure where to point their lenses. For one long moment, neither of us spoke. The ballroom became so quiet that the soft hum of the air vents echoed beneath the chandeliers. Without warning, Adrian straightened his posture. His shoulders squared, his heels came together, and his right hand rose sharply to his forehead. He saluted. A wave of shocked gasps swept across the ballroom. No, the groom of the century was standing at attention before the woman his future mother-in-law had just called an unwanted guest. I returned the salute with the same precision I had learned years earlier. It lasted only a few seconds, but the silence surrounding us made it feel much longer. Celeste's face drained of color. "Adrian," she whispered. "What are you doing?" Her voice cracked under the weight of growing panic. Adrian lowered his hand and faced the crowd. 9 years ago, he said calmly, Commander Aria Ashford led the operation that saved my life and my grandmother's. Every day I've lived since then has been a gift she earned for me. The ballroom erupted with whispers. "Commander," she served. "Who?" Margaret looked at the crowd before speaking with quiet authority. "She's not lying. In fact, you've all been asking the wrong question." She paused, allowing the silence to settle. "The real question is, why did Vivian Ashford spend 9 years hiding the truth about her own daughter?